Killer Innovations Podcast for Tuesday, November 1st, 2005. Show number 34, coming to you from Houston, Texas. Welcome to the Killer Innovations Podcast. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. Before we get started, please keep in mind that the information and opinions expressed in this podcast are mine and mine alone and do not necessarily reflect those of my past, current, or future employers. Well, I'm in Houston today for one day, and then I'm off to LA tomorrow night, and then back to the East Coast over the weekend. Do apologize, this podcast is yet late again. It's been one of those crazy times. I've actually taken on some new responsibilities for my day job, which has swamped me, given that I'm doing double duty here for a little while they hire my replacement into my previous position. So I will try to keep that the impact of the podcast down to a minimum, but appreciate your flexibility as the shows may be a little chaotic here for the next couple of weeks as I try to get settled into the new position. As always, thanks for the feedback. Keep it coming. You can reach me at podcast@killerinnovations.com. You can always call the voicemail feedback line at 703-636-4460, or you can Skype me at Phil_McKinney. It is a new month. So please remember to vote for your favorite podcast out at podcastalley.com. Podcast Alley resets all the vote counts to 0 at the first of the month, and this allows for even the smaller podcasts such as Killer Innovations to restart its vote count and have its listeners basically tell other listeners through the voting about the podcast. So please remember to go out to Podcast Alley and vote for your favorite podcast. This week I did not receive any homework assignments, so we're going to count this as as kind of a rebuke. Last week we had a listener feedback from South Africa sharing weak signals and innovations that are coming out of South Africa, but also look a little bit at the historical, such as the innovations in medical surgery, given that open heart surgery was first performed in South Africa. And so the homework assignment was for you to create a 3 to 5 minute audio clip that I could play in the podcast that describes the innovations that are coming out of your part of the world. So South Africa in particular, around its biomedical, medical research technologies. What is going on in your part of the world? This is your opportunity to share with the listeners so that we can all kind of get a world view of what the hot new areas are on a global scale. So you can send me that audio comment to either by an MP3 file, you can attach it to an email and send it to me, or you can call the voicemail feedback line at 703-636-4460 and just record your comment there. Also, a number of listeners are doing direct download of this podcast. Just want to make you aware that you can subscribe to the RSS feed that allows you then to automatically get each new show. You can subscribe by visiting killerinnovations.com and clicking on the podcast button in the upper right-hand corner, or you can go to Apple iTunes, click on podcast, and then search for Killer Innovations, and you can just hit the subscribe button, and then your iTunes will automatically get each new show as they come out. So hopefully for some listeners who are logging on and downloading each show as it appears on the blog by auto-subscribing, that'll make it a little bit easier. In today's podcast for segment 1, I want to talk about diversity in teams. One of the questions that I get from a lot of the listeners about running brainstorming sessions is, how do you select team members? Which people inside the business should you invite to be part of your Killer Innovations workshop? Well, what I found in my early days was I tended to take people who were already part of my team. So if I was working on a new piece of software or a new piece of hardware or a new device, in the case, my background being in the high-tech world, um, in my naivety in the early days is I would just take my team, put them into a conference room and try to do some brainstorming activities. What I quickly figured out is because we spent so much time together, even though we had some slight diversity in the group, our ideas were I guess what you would call expected ideas. They were just natural next steps given the work that we were already doing in the team. What was a real eye-opener for me is when I actually got involved in doing some workshops for another small company that a friend of mine was running, and he didn't have really much in the way of people inside his organization that he could leverage. So we went out to a series of our friends, business associates, people that we knew through other organizations, and we basically threw these people together. We had young and old, and people that were technology savvy, and people who, were completely neophytes when it came to technology. And we threw them all together. We ran the brainstorming session. The output and the quality of the ideas were phenomenal. I mean, off the scale. So, what was a real eye opener for me was the fact that it's really around this whole concept or issue around diversity. Diversity in the form of a wide range of socioeconomic backgrounds, education, career levels. Are they a manager or are they a support staff? I mean, actually, interestingly enough, one of the best sources for um, as far as idea generation, and don't ask me why, because I've never figured this out, but is the use of receptionists. Um, a really, really good receptionist is very, very observant. They meet and interact with a lot of people day in and day out. They typically have a very broad social circle that they are engaged with. They know a lot of people at a lot of different levels in different organizations and people that they see on a social basis. But for some reason, I've just found receptionists at corporations to be an excellent source for creativity and for innovations. Now, I just came across a new book by Tom Kelly, who is I don't know if he's the president, I guess managing director, I think is the title they use at IDEO. And the title of this new book is The 10 Faces of Innovation. And basically, Tom is talking about who are some of the key skills of individuals that you need to really create an innovative culture. Now, I have not finished the book. The book has just come out. I just purchased it. It's sitting here on the table. And actually, when I get done with this podcast and get it posted, that's my reward for getting the podcast out here tonight. Is I actually get to crack open the book and really dig into it. But in what I've read, as far as just skimming the book and reading some of the reviews, Tom has basically identified 10 skills that you need to create kind of this this innovation culture inside your organization. Now I'm going to list these off. I'm not going to go into details. Maybe in a future podcast, as I finish the book, I'll expound upon these. But I think from the names alone, you'll get a good grasp for what Tom views as kind of these 10 individuals that you really need to have, or not individuals, but maybe groups of individuals inside your organization. One is the anthropologist, the people who really understand the culture, who are really plugged into that. The experimenter, the cross-pollinator. These are kind of those fluttering people who dance around the organization, who can pick up one idea from one area and deposit it into another area. The hurdler. I love these individuals, the people who don't take no for an answer. The collaborator. These are kind of the peacemakers. Get everybody into a room, drive that consensus discussion. The director. So think about it as in the form of a directing of a movie. Next is the experience architect. I also I refer to this person as kind of the user view. So this is the person who can put themselves in the perspective of a customer and how would they interact with whatever this product or service that you're creating. Next is the set designer. So this is all the thing that appears behind the actual product or service that makes the product or service that much richer. Think about a movie where all you had was a stage and and a black curtain. Now think of that same play once all the sets are in place and it transports you into that play, whether it be in a city or on a ship, whatever the case might be. The set designer adds richness to what it is you're delivering. So you need those set designers. Next is the storyteller. These are the people that can go out and convey your story, who can create passion in the people who listen or who hear about what your idea is all about. And then lastly, the caregiver. These are what I don't want to be sexist here, but this is the individuals that I refer to as the moms of the organization. At one company, I had an executive assistant by the name of Betty, and she was clearly the caregiver. She was plugged into everybody's personal needs, everything that was going on in people's personal lives, and really helped me as an executive stay plugged into my team and how I could best help them do kind of this work-life balance. But also, by having that caregiver, it frees up those people to focus on the creativity and the innovation for the business. Beyond these, I would add the poet. So this is the person who typically is very well read. This is somebody that I have found to be a good source of ideas. The other is what I would call the but person. This is the person that says, "Oh, that was a great idea, but." Now, typically people don't want them as part of the workshop sessions because they tend to be negative. But that contrarian view can also help unlock other areas if it's properly managed. The next person that I tend to like to have in my sessions is what I would call the wild person. This is the kid in the mailroom with spikes in his lips and 50 piercings and tattoos and comes to work in a skateboard. Somebody that's really out there on the edge. Next is the kid. Let's face it, depending on where you're at, in my case of developing, breakthrough next generation products and devices, the youth market is extremely attractive. And what I love is this whole concept of having, a conference room full of 45-year-old white males trying to develop the next product that 14-year-olds are going to use. You need to have the people in the room that are your target audience. At the flip side, though, I also like to have what I call the grays. These are the gray hair people that are in the 50 plus age bracket, because albeit many people think that experience can be negative and hindering, experience at the same time can also be refreshing, particularly given a perspective that you're not aware of. As the old saying goes, if you don't remember history, you're bound to repeat it. So, again, with Tom Kelly's book, The 10 Faces of Innovation, the anthropologist, the experimenter, the cross-pollinator, the hurdler, the collaborator, the director, the experience architect, the set designer, the storyteller, and the caregiver. I'd be interested in hearing from you what your view as a successful team. Who would you put into a team that would allow you to create that next killer innovation? Moving on to segment 2, we're not going to do a traditional weak signals. I'm actually just going to go through, and I've been so far behind on the email comments that what I'm going to do is I've highlighted or picked out a handful of emails that I've gotten from a number of you. So I'm actually going to just go through these emails, read them, and answer them, or at least talk about some of the points that are brought up. One that I just got from Jason, It says, I'm a design engineer, but I recently graduated with a degree in industrial design. One way that I keep my creative juices flowing is that I look up design competitions. Even if I'm not eligible to enter them, I still try to solve the problem. This keeps me open to other types of designs. I also look at the past winners. Actually, that's a great idea. Um, I'm a big, my background being that my original major in college was architecture. I'm very visually oriented. And reading, I read a lot of the architectural review magazines and industrial design magazines. I would never classify myself as an industrial designer, but I love looking at the annual competition reviews, those types of things, because I think there are some great ideas. This next email is from Andrew, and this was with regards to um, the Katrina podcast that I did when I came back from New Orleans. And what he let me see here. Just came across a podcast by design firm Lunar Design, so www.lunar.com. I actually subscribe to this, so if you don't, I would suggest you do that. It's a very good podcast. Um, and this also says their September 12, 2005 podcast was an interview with the editor of Dwell magazine. Now, given that I'm an architecture major originally, I'm a reader of Dwell. If you're not a reader of Dwell magazine, it's a great magazine from the standpoint of, rather than being kind of the typical design architecture magazines where you're designing a 15,000 square foot house that 1/10 of 1% of the population could afford. Dwell magazine deals with innovations and design concepts in affordable housing. And in this case, September 12th podcast, this is for Lunar Design, had an interview with the editor of Dwell talking about housing for the residents in New Orleans. And if you recall back to the New Orleans podcast, the Katrina podcast, I talked about the fact that one of the areas that I felt was really needed from the standpoint of Killer Innovations is how do you respond to these kinds of disasters with temporary or interim housing? So I'm actually going to have to listen to that podcast. So again, the September 12th, 2005 podcast for Lunar Design. Okay, here's another email from Don. It says, in early August, you asked for feedback on how your show has affected your listeners. I would like to share briefly the impact on my career life. I will also start by saying that I have not had time to listen to any shows since early August and miss it quite a bit. Well, sorry, Don, but hope you get back to listening. Hopefully, you'll hear this comment on your email. So it says, Killer Innovations has been an essential part of opening up opportunities for me this year. I started listening in March, which would have been in one of the early podcasts, and I'm actually embarrassed, by the quality of some of those early podcasts. I found myself stuck in a box in early summer of 2004 and realized that what I needed was to get out of that situation. I began that process, and one of the steps has been your podcast. The result is 3 patent submissions in the first 5 months of 2005. Wow. 3 more patent submissions pending the time to write them up. One of the completed patent submissions is essential to a current sales effort. One of the other completed patent submissions is essential to retaining a different customer. 2 of the 3 pending are components of a current sales effort. And the remaining pending submission is necessary for roadmap items in 2006. I have since been asked this year to take on coordination of innovation for the company and other positive internal activities. As well, I and a partner have formed a separate company, non-competitive with the current employer, and are in the process of getting that off the ground. Bottom line for me, the content of the podcast helped me feel more confident in my efforts and thinking. I feel out of the box and appreciate a podcast like Killer Innovations and authors like Clayton Christensen and others. You have been fertilizer to this process. Well, you know where fertilizer comes from, right? Please keep up the podcast. It's been a great impact on me and potentially my future. Take care and thank you. Well, Don, I hadn't read this before. I read this just now, but thank you very much. Wow, that is phenomenal output. 3 patent submissions in the first 5 months, all tied to either current sales activities, and as a result, the company asking Don now to be the coordinator for innovation for the company. Um, that is uh, phenomenal. And again, I'd be interested in hearing from other listeners, any the impacts from um, the podcast. Here's another one from Barry. Hey, just want to drop you a line to see how much I'm enjoying the podcast. I'm relatively newcomer and also almost gave up after the first few that I listened to as they were complete garbage. Your episode today on mentoring really struck home with me. I've been fortunate enough to have time to be taken under the wing of a couple of people in my life. First, when I left school and started my first job at the tender age of 16. And then again, when I was 19, I was invited to join someone as a company director simply because he liked my work ethic. In both cases, I gained enormously from it. They, in turn, got to watch someone grow, and frankly, someone who worked as, I won't say the word, ASS, off for them for very little monetary reward. For my 40th birthday, I was pleased to be able to pay for the first one to fly out from the UK to attend, and had an absolute blast going over all times. I'm in my middle age period, and now, but I have managed to give similar support to a couple of people along the way, and have enjoyed watching these people grow into true professionals and, more importantly, good friends. And he goes on. His other comment was, on the other side, I completely agree with you about colleges not teaching you how to think. I've gotten a lot of feedback on that one, some agreeing and some not agreeing with them. Anyways, just want to say thanks. Your podcast has given me some great. So the point here is about the mentoring process of working and paying it forward. In my case, Bob Davis took me as fresh out of college, mentored me, really taught me how to think, how to look at things differently than the way you normally think about it, and really was the one who unlocked my creative side. And hopefully this is just a little payback for the investment that Bob made in me, and in turn, you as the listeners. The next one, Michael. My name is Michael, and I'm currently studying manufacturing engineering and management at the University of Nottingham, England. Well, for those of you who are new listeners to the podcast, the listener base for Killer Innovations breaks down to U.S. being the largest, Australia, New Zealand being the second largest listener base, and then the UK. So he goes to the University of Nottingham. I currently find myself in the IMI Vision working on my master's project in the field of R&D. He's written the procedure and stumbled across the podcast. He's really talking about creating a procedure for the management of risks associated with technology development. He's looking to create a comparative assessment chart of projects at the end of the process at the aim of plotting the values against either the risk-adjusted NPV or the real options value of the project. Okay, now we're getting beyond. But basically what he's looking for is if you look at the total value of an innovation that you're working on, how do you assess risk and how do you assess value from that? Now, Michael has posted some information into the KI community site on the research work that he's doing, so I would encourage you to go out if you're interested in understanding risk and risk assessments of innovation, so you can understand the value or making decisions on how much you should invest. That's a key point. Hello, Phil. You most probably have heard about Negroponti's design of the $100 laptop aimed at developing countries. Yes, I have heard of it, have looked at it closely. Now, this is my own personal opinion. It is not my employer's opinion, but the $100 laptop, I think, is a phenomenal design objective. The only caution that I would give, and there's a lot of activities, whether it's the MIT Media Lab, which is where Nicholas Negroponte is working on the $100 laptop, or the AMD initiative, or others in the field. I think it's a noble effort. I think we have to figure out a way to get technology into developing countries. The only thing that I would caution is that the design objective should not only be $100, but it should be $100 full function, meaning that it's not just, for instance, a glorified calculator or some other stripped down device, but that it truly is a device that allows you to bridge the digital gap. So again, Lock, L-O-I-C is this person's name. She's asking about the $100 laptop. We live in South Africa and probably could come up with a government-backed market for this product when it's released. So here's somebody who's saying, hey, I'm interested, and there might be the government in the area might be extremely interested in moving this forward, and I think that's great. And again, I think it's part of also that innovations are not tied to just for-profit organizations, but we should apply our creativity and our innovation to a wide range of activities. Let's see, this one's from Daryl. I think we'll make this the last one for this podcast because we're running out of time already. But it says, Dear Phil, just a quick email to send you my compliments for what is a great show, extremely interesting and informative. Over the last 7 to 8 days, I've listened to the podcast up to show 23. Well, we're now at what, 30? This is show 34. Is that what I said? Yep, 34. So that means there's like 17 hours of listening. So he says, over the last 7 to 8 days, I've listened to the podcast up to show 23. In fact, lately I can confidently say that I've been spending a lot more time with you than with my wife. I'm originally from London, but now work for a small management consultancy based in Florence, Italy. I work mainly with SMEs, small and medium enterprises, and fairly traditional industries, but the areas of innovation is one that I'm extremely interested in and something that I'm always trying to encourage our clients to get involved in. Every year, our firm hosts a series of 3-course workshops at a hotel here in Florence where we present new ideas and discuss problems with a selection of clients, entrepreneurs, students, bankers, civil servants, etc. This year, we will be talking about innovation, and in particular, the innovation process. So I will almost certainly be using some of the ideas that have come out of the podcast and Killer Innovations forum. I'll be in touch after to let you know how it works out. Definitely, Daryl, interested. Finally, given all the work you really put into the podcast, I'm not exactly sure why you do it, but and I'm sure a lot of others are extremely glad that you do it. Well, the feedback that I get from you and other listeners has been really the key motivator for me on the whole during the podcast. And as I've said before, hopefully just my little contribution of sharing with you kind of those lessons learned and the pitfalls when I was trying to figure out how to really unlock my own creative abilities and as part of my job function, that hopefully what I've learned and passed on can be helpful to you. And again, the only thing that I ask is that you pass it on to others. With that, we're going to move on to segment 3, the killer question of the week. This week's killer question is one that I think is somewhat obvious, but in some cases you may not see it as being overly obvious. But this week's killer question is could I double my product's depth or cut the breadth in half? Again, could I double my product's depth or cut the breadth in half? So this is talking about features and functions. And this is kind of the old 80-20 rule where you can, 20% of the feature functions or benefits or number of items in the catalog generate 80% of your revenue. And so the question really comes in is that if you look at your product or you look at your catalog or you look at your total market offering, what would happen if you said, okay, I offer 5 different colors of my product? Well, what if you double it? Does that do anything? Does it get you into some areas that you haven't thought of? If I have, if I write a piece of software and it works with 5 mobile phones, what happens if I make it work with 10 different mobile phones? What happens if I add double the feature set? The flip side is what happens if I cut the feature set in half. Now, some examples of, for instance, the cutting or adding features or reducing features. One would be the iPod. Think about it. Rather than just being the MP3, if I double the feature functions, well, what are feature functions that are beyond just simply playing the music? Well, one is I need to have a source of music, and two, I need to have the ability to easily synchronize it. So in the case of Apple, not only creating the iPod, but creating iTunes, creating the client that will allow you to do very easy synchronization, and then going to all the studios and getting access to all of the content. Likewise, low-cost airlines. So rather than serving you a meal, what would happen if I took that feature function or breadth of my product away? And therefore you did not have a meal, maybe not even a snack. I've been on many United Airlines flights now here in the U.S. from Washington, D.C. to San Francisco, and if you're in the coach class of that flight, there is no food, or you have to pay for that food. The flip side is what about Bose stereos? Now, I'm a big Bose fan. I have my Bose noise-canceling headphones. I have my Bose Wave radio. They've got this new one. I think it's called the System 25, I think is what it's called. And basically it learns your music and learns what you like. So take your features rather than just playing your audio, but it actually learns what you like and will go through your entire catalog of music and play other songs that are in that similar, not just genre, but actually the level of beat, the mood set, whatever the case that defines the music. I don't know how they do it, but I can tell you that after you've listened to 3 or 4 songs and you've said, ooh, I like that song, or no, I don't like that song, it'll randomly go grab a song and play it for you, one that you had not thought of, but is absolutely perfect out of your entire audio catalog. So there's a case where Bose has gone off and developed incredible depth of feature and functions, far beyond what any user would expect, but it drives an incredible amount of value from that product, and Bose gets the premium for that. Likewise, if you go to the discount retailers, these are like the big warehouse stores. In the U.S., we call, one of them is called Costco's. So get rid of all the frills. You basically go in, things are sitting on pallets. You're not in a nice building, but you basically get everything at an extremely cheap price. So take the feature functions or take half the experience away. No carpeting, warehouse lighting, no stocking that on a nice shelf. It's just sitting on pallets. So can you cut away half your feature functions, in this case, not just product features, but the overall experience, and what does that get you? In this case, Costco, from the standpoint of low-cost retailing. So again, this week's killer question is, could I double my product depth or cut the breadth in half for the product or service that you're going to offer? With that, thanks for listening. Hopefully, the segment 2 where we went through some of the emails was something that you found interesting. I'm just doing that this week just to try to get through some of those emails, but some of them I thought were interesting. I did not pre-screen those, so those were just ones that I just randomly selected out of the mailbox. But if you have comments and feedback, questions, please keep the feedback coming. Please send in your questions. Please send in your suggestions for future shows. You can reach me at podcast@killerinnovations.com. You can always call the feedback line at 703-636-4460, or you can Skype at Phil_McKinney. And remember to vote. It is November 1st today, so you can go out and re-vote for Killer Innovations and the other podcast that you truly enjoy. It's the easiest way to let the producers of your podcast know that you truly appreciate the effort that they put in. Tell others about the podcast. As I shared in segment 2, really my mission here is to help arm you with proven tools, tricks, and the pitfalls to avoid unlocking your full potential to be creative. And hopefully you find these tools and tricks and approaches helpful in your day-to-day job. You can subscribe to this podcast by visiting killerinnovations.com and clicking on the podcast button on the right-hand side. You can also visit iTunes and search for Killer Innovations. So, get subscribed, get others to subscribe. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.